Hello, everybody. Welcome to Literati Circle. Today, I want to talk a little about the structures of Romanticism, early Romanticism, and the recreation and redefinition, the creation of a new definition of the new continent, America, as old Europe was crumbling in its moral fibers. Romanticism was a redefining of Roman Greece. First countries to advocate democratic strands, which were very dynamic in its moving social fabrics. And unlike kingdoms in Europe, contemporary kingdoms of Europe, contemporary to Shakespeare and Blake and the times between the Elizabethan and Victorian periods, the social fabrics, unlike our own today, the kingdoms were privatized, and democracy was ridiculed and regulated. Whereas now the self is privatized and the government becomes a public asset, not the self to be a public asset. And if we look back in history, we could see the Romantics trying to find this idea of democracy and freedom and the common good for the collective consciousness of society. And so we see examples like, for example, Lord Byron traveling Southern Europe and habitating in the great Saint Lazaro of Italy, which was an Armenian monastery. And this monastery attempted to recreate and to transcend back to the origins of the conception of free will and the eternal self-love, which many countries back during the time of AD, the beginning of AD, attempted to find this idea of democracy and privatized the privatized soul, privatizing the soul through religious strands, through Christian strands, through a revitalization and a revival of spirit. But the spirit was stolen by monarchs and empirical forces. And so the Romantics attempted to bring that back to the self. So Shelley, traveling through France and Mont Blanc in order to find this original concept of self-determination. Byron attempting to find the self-determination and will of a transcending democratic structure of man through the liturgies and literature of the Armenian antiquities. And then we come to Blake, and Blake took it upon himself to see democracy and the new territory, the new country, and a level of creating Romanticism as a reincarnation of being and self, an appreciation of Roman antiquity, which Romanticism is derived from those two words. To be like a Roman was such a very important part of the evolution in Western civility at that time. Now, try reading The Tempest as an early predecessor of the definition that Shakespeare offers of a new America, which is a land of fairy and magic. And what's fascinating is that, although that sounds naive as in America's vision, the strands of magic and the strands of this fate, this fairy fate, this new romantic fate, was redefined in a very loose way through Shakespeare, and in a more of a concrete way through the Romantics prior to the French Revolution and the American Revolution. America was the land of fairy and magic to Shakespeare, which was to become in Blake a redressing vision of a duality of man emerging, instead of a superfluous, fictitious fairy and magic state, rather a creation of a new country out of the selfless wills of the many selves who attempted to create a multifaceted structure that was founded and constituted in the rights of man. And that was and is a small chunk of an understanding of the evolution of literature, democracy, the idea of freedom, of a sacrosanct, sanctimonious arena that has created the world today. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of my videos on Literati Circle.